So, yeah, I'm Cole Fisher. I'm the Imperiled Species Education and Outreach Coordinator for Fish and Wildlife. I work out of the East Lansing office. So, my job is, which we'll talk about a little bit more, but it's to give presentations like this. So I'm glad to be out here to talk to you guys. A little bit of background about fish and wildlife in general. We are a bureau underneath the Department of the Interior, so we're a federal organization, and about 70,000 people work for the Department of the Interior currently, and then 9,000 people work for Fish and Wildlife currently. And I won't cover all of the branches and all of the bureaus, but there's some big ones that you've definitely heard of. National Park Service, Fish and Wildlife is fairly popular. The Bureau of Land Management is another one that's related, they're all tied to conservation, but that one's something that you may have heard of, and they do a lot of really good work. And underneath all of these kind of branches are different programs. So like you can see, Fish and Wildlife has a bunch of different programs, and I'm not going to go through all of them. But some of like kind of the more interesting ones, or the ones that I think are interesting, are the Migratory Bird Program. So they're in charge of all of the bird management in the country. They do habitat conservation, and then they also oversee the implementation of the Eagle Act. So that's how we protect bald eagles, and the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, and that is how we protect birds that are either migrating around the U.S., so like from state to state, or migrating over borders, so they could be coming from like overseas or from Mexico or Canada, and they also kind of regulate and conserve those birds, which is pretty cool. The National Wildlife Refuge System is another great program under Fish and Wildlife. They manage 95 million acres of land and 850 million acres of marine water, and so they are kind of partnered. That marine water section is kind of partnered with the Fish and Aquatic Conservation Program. They also do all of the aquatic conservation for the country, but they're not only focused on that marine water. They do like lakes and rivers and other types of aquatic conservation as well. So that's a really cool program. All of those that I just mentioned are regulatory bodies, so they use like our acts and laws to regulate what can and can't happen to different habitats or different species. But there's also non-regulatory bodies under Fish and Wildlife. So Science Applications is a non-regulatory program, and they tackle conservation issues by bringing partners together, and they deliver scientific information. So their goal is to either do research or gather research and then get that out to the public and to other like government organizations. And they were founded on climate adaptation, so that was kind of like how they got their roots, and they still do a lot of that work today. And then we have another regulatory body that's pretty interesting, International Affairs. So their program focuses on obviously international concerns, and that includes domestic species that extend beyond the borders. So again, like there's a lot of animals that live in Canada, United States, and Mexico, and so they would control all of those species and kind of help regulate all of those species in different places. But then there's also like trafficking, wildlife product trafficking, and so they partner with the law enforcement division to combat that. So that could be anything from, again, going like over our direct borders, or like through air or boat travel and coming in from overseas. And so that is pretty cool. We have like a whole division of special agents basically that do that, which is really interesting. And then there's Partners for Fish and Wildlife, which is another program, and they are the ones that work with private landowners. So if there is like a big area like this, then you have a ton of acreage, or you have like 100 acres of forest and you want to manage it, Partners for Fish and Wildlife will come out, they'll give you free technical support, and then they'll give you also usually financial assistance, help you apply for grants and things like that to manage your land and to help conserve and improve the wildlife habitat on that private land. So that's kind of a broad overview of all of our programs. I talked about a lot of the programs. I didn't mention mine yet. So I actually am in the Ecological Services program. We are under Fish and Wildlife, like I said, but we are only focused on endangered species or threatened and endangered species. And we're only focused on federally listed species. So that's kind of a caveat that we can get into a little bit later. But our main job is to use the Endangered Species Act and to use it to protect the species, to conserve their habitat. We basically make sure that any projects that are going on in the state, so if there's like a bridge going in or a dam going in a river, we make sure that those projects aren't impacting any of our listed species, just so that we can protect them and keep them around. And the goal of our program is not to like shut projects down. So a lot of times that's kind of how Fish and Wildlife is painted, is they're trying to do some development or a government project, and Fish and Wildlife comes in and says that they're not allowed to do it because there's an endangered species. Our goal is to actually work through those issues and help them create conservation measures and help them work around kind of those issues, and sometimes even like donate to different funds or to different areas where we know that a species is going to be impacted, but we're going to do our best to kind of mitigate that in other areas of the state or something like that. So that is kind of my role or my program in Fish and Wildlife. And a little bit about my background. I originally went to Michigan Tech up in the UP pursuing biochemistry. I realized when I was up there that I didn't love doing biochemistry. It was a lot of chemistry, and I wanted to do more biology. So I transferred to Michigan State. I got a degree in plant biology and a minor in forestry, and that was super interesting. All those classes are really cool if you're interested in that. And while I was there, I did a lot of things like outside of conservation work as well. So I worked in a red blood cell research lab. I worked in a horticulture research lab, which is like vegetable growing. And then I also worked for the botanical gardens for a while. And now I'm here. I work at Fish and Wildlife. So I kind of had a different path than a lot of people, and that's super common in this field. There's a lot of people just exploring their interests as they go and finding their way as they move through their career. So now my job is to give presentations like this. I talk to a lot of classes, a lot of clubs, festivals. So there's a couple festivals around the state that we participate in. And then I also have responsibilities outside of the education side. So I work in the field. As you can see in these pictures, that's some of the field work that I've done so far. When I love to get outside. And then I also do some other like data entry and data management type projects, and I'll talk a little bit about that later as well. But some of the field work, which I think is a little bit more interesting. Over here, we're doing eastern Massasauga rattlesnake field work. So that kind of bucket and silt fence that you see set up is a camera trap. The snakes basically go in the bucket, and we take a picture of them with like a motion activated camera. And we saw an eastern Massasauga rattlesnake on that trip, which is pretty rare, and it was a super cool experience. And then I've also done some aquatic macroinvertebrate surveys, which is basically like water bugs. So we scoop them off the bottom with our nets, and then we ID them all. And we were looking for a rare water beetle, and we found a new population of them, which was really interesting. So some of the work that you might get to do if you pursue something in this field. For a little bit more background just on Fish and Wildlife in general, these are the listed species that we have in Michigan. So that we have 29 that are currently listed. There's endangered, which is all the ones that have an E, threatened for the T, and then there's proposed, which is monarch and salamander mussel. These are both basically like species that we're looking out for because they're just kind of bumping up onto the list, and it's a lot easier to prevent them from becoming threatened or endangered than it is to take them off. So those are like preventative measures that we're working with. And then the whooping crane is extirpated. That just means that it wasn't, or it's not currently in Michigan. It was at one time, but there's no like recorded sightings of it anymore. So it's kind of on our radar, like if we're trying to bring it back or if we see it again in the future. And this also like goes to show that there's a ton of different things that you're going to be working with if you get into this field or if you go into conservation. There's no way that anyone's going to be an expert on all these species. I am by no means an expert on basically any of these species. The plants I might know a little bit more about, but when you get into the field, you are taking a job because it interests you, and then you're learning on the go basically. And so if you take a job doing bat research, then once you get there, they're going to teach you how to do bat research essentially. It's very rare that you're like school is going to directly correlate to the animal that you actually work with or the plant that you actually work with. Just because college is a lot more general, and even a master's program, which I'll talk about later again, is usually a lot broader and kind of giving you a lot of background for these species. So this is kind of more my day-to-day. I think it's important that when you're looking into jobs, you kind of know like what you're getting into every single day. It's really easy to say that I get to do like field work all the time and the job is super cool. I also have office work a lot. In this specific job, I do a lot of like presentations. So I'm making presentations a lot. I also am contacting people a ton. Like a lot of my job is like reaching out to the nature center and reaching out to different 4-H clubs or schools and just communicating with them, trying to allow them to get me in and make sure that I'm like educating them on what the programs are about and how they can help out their club or class or whatever it may be. Like I said a little bit, I do some data entry projects as well. So I'm in Excel a lot, putting in field data. We get data from all across the state and really all across the country. But we have partners with basically every other government organization that does anything related to conservation or natural resources. And so they'll send us data a lot of times, and then I can put it into our spreadsheets. The other application in the corner is ArcGIS Pro. That's a mapping software, essentially, and it's super powerful. It's something that we use a lot, and if you do get into conservation, you will likely use it. But that allows us to put all of our species information into one map for the whole country, essentially. And then from there, we can make projections. We can see where all of the animals are, or where they were during our surveys, and kind of track them around the state and around the country. So that's a lot of what I do day to day. I also travel. So I travel for field work, I travel for these presentations, and my range is essentially like the whole lower half of the Lower Peninsula. I do work in almost every county, and like today, I'm from East Lansing, or my office is in East Lansing, so it's about an hour drive to a lot of the presentations. So that's something that's pretty common, especially if you're doing really like heavy field work. If you were working for Fish and Wildlife out of East Lansing, there's not a lot of field work going on in East Lansing because it's a city. So you're going to have to drive out to the field sites, and that's pretty common too, just kind of like across the field. Yeah, again, these are from doing Eastern Massasauga work and that beetle sampling work. Let's see. These are some different organizations that you might want to work for. So DNR is a pretty well-known state organization. They have a lot of great programs. They have programs obviously all over the state, including the UP, and then they also have kind of different like branches that come off, just like Fish and Wildlife, like I showed you in the beginning. So these SISMAs in the bottom, that's Cooperative Invasive Species Management Units, or management areas, and then you work in a unit. And those are like hands-on. You're going out into the field every single day, and you're like cutting down invasive species, you're treating with herbicides, you're doing site assessments and those kind of things. And that's a really good way to like kind of start off your career in the state government as well. Those are like entry-level positions right when out of your bachelor's degree, potentially out of high school when they post them, and I'll talk about that on the next slide. But that's where a lot of people start their careers, and invasive species management is like a huge field. MI Invasives, or M Invasives, Michigan Invasive Species Coalition, they're actually a private organization. And so that's another option. Like you don't have to go into government work, whether it's state or federal. There's private organizations that get funding from other places to do kind of similar work. They basically do exactly what the SISMAs do, and you're out in the field managing invasives all day. Some other things, Eagle, that's a really great organization to work for. They do all the contaminants. So if you like water and soil quality or any type of like chemistry leaning work, they do a ton of that. They also do field work, like going out and sampling, but their job is basically to make sure if there's like a spill or some kind of leaching from a factory or something, they do all like the contaminants work. So making sure our soil and water aren't contaminated, which is super interesting, and they do a lot of cool projects. There's a bunch of other ones, and I talked a little bit about them. Michigan Natural Features Inventory actually is one that's super interesting. They are a Michigan State organization. So they are solely research. They have biologists that go all over the state looking for rare plants, rare animals, and just doing like a ton of super cool research. And all of the data that they get basically funnels up the train into the state government and into the federal government. So we use their database for a ton of our like predictive modeling and just our general like species assessments across the state. So all of these are just kind of different examples of places you could work. And early in your career, you're gonna move around a lot. So like currently, I'm with Fish and Wildlife. My next position, starting in mid-May, is with the USGS, which is the U.S. Geological Survey. Again, under Department of the Interior, but doing slightly different work. So that's kind of just, you're gonna bounce around and get to work at a lot of different cool places. This is the like estimated, it's just the one I pulled off the line, but the federal pay scale. It's something to think about when you're getting into this field. You should like be thinking about where it's gonna take you in your life, and this is kind of a good way to approximate that. The basis behind the scale is that you're supposed to be able to move through it in 18 years, like from bottom to top, and that's generally pretty like doable. A lot of people bounce around. You're not necessarily like moving up the rungs every single time you get a new job, but it's in general this is kind of what your career is going to look like. If you get a bachelor's degree, that's a way to move up the scale faster. So from 1 to 6 are generally considered like positions that you could get without going to college. I have not seen these really posted. I'm not sure if they still post them a lot. Most of the positions start basically at GS7, and that is pretty much what you get when you come out of school with a bachelor's degree. So the positions that I'm looking at are basically around that kind of ranking. And it is like a tiered ranking system, so the longer that you work in the government, or the longer that you work in a position, the higher you move up on the scale. So it's just like kind of what you can expect to make over the course of your career. And GS15, that's like a very doable place to get to. You usually have a master's degree at that point, or you've worked for a really long time and you're basically the expert in your office. You're doing a lot of administrative work, a lot of like supervising, a lot of writing, and so that's kind of like where your career, where you're set up, and you can stay there for 10 or 15 years and retire out of that position. But in the lower careers, like around GS7 to GS9, that's where you're kind of bouncing around a lot. You might switch positions pretty frequently, and that's totally okay. That's very normal for this field. Another way to move up the scale is by going to school. So you can go back after your bachelor's and get a master's or a PhD. And when you do that, that usually bumps you up a couple levels. So that might put you from a 7 to a 9 or a 10. And that's something that a lot of people choose to do. They get a lot of good field experience right out of college, and then they go back for their master's. That's basically what my path is going to look like. I'm going to work for a few years and then go back into school and get a master's to kind of bump up the scale a little bit and be able to get higher level jobs. So that's something to think about too. If you enjoy school, you can definitely be in school and go straight into your master's and come out being kind of more of like a supervisor, more of an expert in that field, which is really cool. And the state has a very similar pay scale. I do have a link if we want to look at it later, but it's pretty much the same, and it works the same way. Like the longer you're there, the more promotions you get and the more you get paid. Yeah. So that's kind of like what happens once you actually get a position, but it's important to know how you get a position, and especially if you're looking at schools, kind of looking at programs that you want to study and you want to get into. So I put up a whole bunch of example degrees. Ecology is a huge one. Forestry is a little bit more specific, I would say. If you get a forestry degree, you probably want to be a forester. And there's a bunch of different stuff that goes along with that. But that's a very common degree to get. And then there's a ton more. I didn't even put my own degree on the list. Plant biology is not one that like a lot of people get. Even in my office, it's pretty uncommon that you see a plant biologist. But that just kind of goes to show you that any degree that's related to natural resources at all, or related to plants and animals, you can pretty much make work in this field. It's really nice to have a wide background a wide variety of experiences. That's something that employers really look for. Um, yeah, so like if you're interested in something and you want to study a certain plant or animal, or a certain type of like water quality, if that's something you're interested in, you can do it and you can get a career basically in conservation. Um, Along the same lines, it's really important that you stay open-minded when you're looking into it or when you're in your career. That was the biggest advice that anyone in my office gave to me, and that's the biggest advice that they wanted me to give to you, is basically just like explore your interests and stay open. You're going to have to do a lot of moving around, most likely, and you're going to change jobs a lot. You're going to work with a lot of new species that you never thought you would, but it's all really cool. It's a very unique experience, and you get to see a lot of really interesting places and work with a lot of really interesting people. So that's kind of like the biggest takeaway that my office had for you guys. I also included all of our regions. These are like the federal regions of the country. As you can see, like we deal with everything. So if you get into a federal job, there's a chance that you might get a position in a different region. I had a coworker, he started out his career in Michigan. He then moved to Region 6 for some time. He then moved to Africa and was studying African wildlife for a couple years, came back to Michigan and now studies rattlesnakes. So he never thought that he would be studying rattlesnakes at the beginning of his career. He started out studying butterflies. And so you kind of just go with whatever positions you get, and you get the experience as you go. So that's something that I really enjoy about this field, is I get to work with a lot of different species I never thought I would. I never thought I would work with any animals, studying plants. So something to keep in mind too, I guess, is if you like that kind of flexible lifestyle, that's definitely something you can have. It's also important to like think about work-life balance. So along with that flexibility, especially in the federal government, once you leave work, you can't really work on anything anymore. Like this is my government laptop, so once I go home, I don't like open it ever again, which is really nice. There's a lot of jobs that, you know, going back to the pay scale, might make you a little bit more money, but you might be working until 9 p.m. or have to stay at the office late. Generally, that's not something that you really run into in the conservation field, especially with field work. You have to be with your colleagues, you have to be with your team the whole time, and no one is going out to do field work at 9 p.m. Like once you're done for the day, you go home and you're not like constantly thinking about your job. So that's something to think about, and that leaves you time to like pursue other interests, and especially for people that go into this, to like pursue being outdoors and nature even more. Even when you get done with a field day, you might be in a really cool area and you can go explore and like hike around or do whatever. So that's something to think about. Yeah, and just in general, it affords you the opportunity to work in some really cool places. Even just like in Michigan, you might work anywhere in the state, and most of the time, those are the places that are like untouched by people, which is really interesting. Yeah, so this is just like some examples of what I got to do throughout my education and career. Like I said, I was like working in horticulture, so I was actually started out working in asparagus growing and learned a lot about like vegetable production. And that's definitely something that you wouldn't think is necessarily applicable to conservation, but you use a lot of those same skills throughout your whole career. So even when you are in school or in college, thinking that something doesn't apply, it for sure does, especially when no one is an expert and everyone is learning as they go. It's really good to have just those like background skills when you're moving forward. Also, where is it up here? This picture, that is not even from my work, that's from my class. So when you're in school, if you're pursuing any type of conservation positions, you probably take an ecology class, probably take a like plant ID class, and you get to go to really interesting places. This is like we were walking around a swamp doing turtle trapping, and that was my class. Like I got graded for that, and it was really interesting. And it's just a fun, little bit more free-flowing kind of education and career path. Yeah, do you guys have questions? Yeah.
I'm wondering with the Massasauga, do you know of anybody currently who is working on Massasauga research at Southern Lakes State Park?
I don't. I hear a lot about that research. And I hear a lot about the research for Massasaugas all over the state. But the species lead for Massasauga, so something I didn't say, I guess, is in my office, in the Fish and Wildlife office in Michigan, all of the biologists there are like assigned to a few species that they are like the leads on. And so once they go in, you get assigned your species and you're responsible for knowing like everything there is to know about that. And then you're also responsible for developing like their conservation plans and knowing everything about what's happening in the state to your species. So the species lead for Massasauga is definitely up on that, and we actually have surveys coming up in Grayling. So the first week of May, I'll be out in the field looking for snakes for the whole week. So, anybody else? For college, for sure. Yeah, it's always good to apply for scholarships. I definitely applied when I was going into school. Masters especially is really nice when you're going into this field or a lot of STEM fields in general, a lot of like science fields, I would say, where you're working in the lab for your research. Those are usually paid positions. So you have the option of going to school and paying for it. But you can also basically apply to work in someone's lab, and while you're working there, you're getting your master's, like you're helping them with your research. So a lot of people come out of grad school with their master's without a lot of debt, if any, and the stipend isn't anything crazy. It's pretty minimal, but it's kind of enough to get you through school. So that's a really, really good point is, yeah, if you're not willing to like go and pay $100,000 to get your master's, likely you'll be getting paid to do that work. And there's definitely like a lot of ranges of colleges to go to as well for this. So I went to Michigan Tech. They are an engineering school, but they also have like one of the top 5 forestry programs in the country. So you would never almost expect that. There's a lot of like community colleges that are much more affordable to go to, and you can get a lot of your degree done before you end up in maybe like a bigger school. And so that's definitely a really good option. And then there's just like a lot of schools that are not like nationally popular. Central Michigan, while they're still like a fairly big school for Michigan, if you left the state, a lot of people probably would not have heard of them. They have a really good research program specifically like for mussels. They do a ton of like aquatic research, but for everything in general, like I know a couple people got their masters from Central Michigan and are doing super well. So I would say that there's generally something you can do at almost every school, which is why I didn't include like a college list with those majors. If you major in one of those, you're likely to kind of be able to get a position. It's mostly based on like experience. Is anyone thinking of like going into this directly or like know what they want to study? Yes? What do you want to do? Do you know?
I want to major in zoology.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I know one of my friends from college was a zoology, plant biology double major, and so he always had really interesting classes. Anybody like not want to do this but still planning on going to college for something else?
What's the most interesting position that you found that is kind of unique?
That's unique. One that I was really looking at that I thought was super unique is sea lamprey control. That's a really big thing in Michigan. I know like they talk about sea lampreys a decent amount in school, so hopefully you guys have kind of heard of them, but they're super invasive in Michigan, and we have a whole program. We have places in the UP and a couple places downstate that all they do is like go out and apply lampricide, which kills sea lampreys, and do other types of like conservation measures for that. That one is super cool. They're out in the field every single day, and that's something where even the supervisors that work in sea lamprey control are often going out with their crew because you need so many people on the boat just to do the work. So there's different levels, and there's definitely different ways to move up in the pay scale and move up in your career and still be able to balance that with like enough field work that you're happy with like kind of what you do. And a lot of people, like I said, bounce around the scale. So you might start out in your career and make it to kind of like your final path or to a higher level job, and find out that all you're doing there is writing grants and trying to get funding for your program, which is where pretty much all of our money comes from, is from writing grants, and then that money's passed down from the government so that we can do our work. But if you don't like doing that, there's definitely opportunities to like take a step back and go back and work out in the field, or step back and work as a supervisor for a smaller group of people. That's something that happens all the time, and it's really just kind of what you make it as you're going through. Yeah.
For the students who are here,
Mm-hmm.
are there any particular like classes or tracks that you would recommend that they go into in high school so that they're got a leg up going into
Yeah, so anything that is like science related, so all of these majors have like a science component essentially. Even like geographical information systems, you have to know a lot about science. So I would say anything that is related to that, definitely stick on. I know I got a lot of credits out of the way in high school doing like biology and chemistry. Everyone has to take those, so if you can get them done in high school, for sure pursue that. Otherwise, it's just good to, like I said, like a community college track is a really great way, or dual enrollment in high school. So if you can take some like gen eds at your community college while you're in high school and get credit for that, that's a super good way to kind of like move through school a little bit quicker. And that's something I think about almost all of these majors, that if you really do want to get out of school as fast as possible, or if you want to pay as little as possible, there's some degrees that like you can't really do that. Like engineering, you're at most schools gonna be there for 4 years, no matter how many credits you come in with. But a lot of these, like I was able to get out early, and it's very doable, and a lot of people can do it. So just because a lot of it is, again, it's like field-based, it's experience-based work. So they're not so much looking at your education as much as they are like what jobs you've had once you get out of school. So, yeah.
So I'm really impressed with all the different schools that are available out there. That's really great.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not familiar with this type of career, but I'm going to ask a question.
Yeah.
What are some of the applications today that this career helps in everyday living? What are, like, for example, lawyers or doctors, they get to,
Right.
So how does this career impact,
Yeah.
everyday life?
I think it does a lot more than people realize. There's a lot of ecosystem services. That's like a big phrase that we throw around all the time. It's basically like, what does the ecosystem do for us? Having a clean watershed and clean water that's being filtered by the environment is like vastly important. And if we didn't have that, we wouldn't, like, you'd have to pay a lot to drink water. So keeping like our aquifers clean, keeping our lakes clean, which is a big part of what we do and what a lot of organizations do, that helps us out a ton. And then there's also things like bat conservation. Bats actually protect farms from like insects and other like crop eating bugs a lot. I think it was a few $1 billion a year that isn't spent on insecticides just because bats are around. And as we've seen a decline in bats, we have seen like an increase in the price of food in general, and also of like application of insecticides and things like that. So it's definitely all interconnected. And yeah, like there's a lot of careers, like if you're a nurse, you're very directly impacting one person's life. This is for sure more broad, but like air quality, water quality, pest reduction is all super important. Even things like Eastern Massasauga rattlesnake, they're super uncommon, but in the areas that they are, they have like a lower rodent population. That helps, one, just like a pest issue, but also like a human disease issue, rodent spread diseases. And if you have a rattlesnake on your property, or one that is hibernating under your barn, you likely don't have as many mice, and therefore like you don't have as many pathogens like around your home or wherever. So it's all super important. Even the invasive species stuff kind of ties all back to that. So that's a good question. No, it's a great question though. And I mean, like just in my path alone, there's other ways to go once you get into conservation. The Department of Agriculture is a really big one to work for. They do, again, like surprisingly a lot more conservation work than you would think, and that's directly impacting like food and crop production. Or if you get out there and you decide that you like either farm animals or like food crops, all of these skills that you're learning in these degrees can like easily be transferred over to any of those degrees as well, or any of those careers. So definitely something to think about. Cool. If you guys have more questions, like we can stick around and chat. Also, you can get my email, and this is like my job, so feel free to email me, see about careers. But yeah, it was great talking to you. So,
Thank you so much. Thanks,
yeah,
Cole.
yeah.
That was excellent. Appreciate it. We would welcome anybody having some snacks. Yes, thank you.
Thanks.
Anybody who would like to have some snacks, and feel free to come up and talk to Cole for the time that he's here.
Yeah.
And even if you want to see any specific slides or anything, that might be good, because I know that one with the pave.
Yeah,
It'd be great
it's
to
important.
take some, pictures of if anybody wants to do that.
For sure.
So, great. Thank you
Thanks.
so much for coming out. Appreciate it. Also, if anybody's interested, Cole is going to be back in a few weeks, and on April 7th, he's going to be presenting another program on pollinators, which is a really great and needed skill these days, because if we didn't have pollinators, we probably wouldn't have nearly the number of food that we have, and all of our plants. So feel free to come back and join Cole again on April 7th, 6 o'clock, right here.
Mm-hmm.
And anybody who did not get one, feel free to grab a flyer on careers if you want to check that out. Thank you very
Cool.
much. Feel free
Thank
to
you.
come up and grab some snacks. Thanks, everyone.
Want a career in conservation?
Just wanted to ask you some questions.
Yeah, no problem.
Looking to do like some job shadowing.
Okay, cool.
Don't know where to start.
Yeah,
I suppose.
that's totally fair. I know, so like Fish and Wildlife and a lot of government organizations do like volunteering. I think for some things you might have to be 18 just because of like some of the work is fairly dangerous when we're working with animals.
Or like shackle with
Like out into the field, yep. But once you do, like once you're getting ready to like go into college and things, that is something I would highly recommend. And again, if you even just search like Fish and Wildlife, our website in Michigan should come up. So if you're looking for like the Michigan field office for Fish and Wildlife, definitely do that. But you'd also be like more than welcome to come like see our office and talk to a bunch of people. I'm happy to.
get your email.
Yeah, I can write it down or something
She's
if you
doing
want.
that. She's doing her college stuff. And you're 10th grade right now. She's
Yeah.
doing
Okay.
her college stuff right now.
Yeah, no, that'd be perfect. Yeah, my office is super willing. I mean, we're in East Lansing, so it's a bit of a drive to get out there, obviously. But there's other people that we could connect you with, I'm sure, even like around here, that would love. They like having people out usually, and everyone is super happy to talk. So you said you wanted to do like more zoology.
Yeah, I want to major in zoology, but I don't know what I want my minor to be.
Cool.
But there's a bunch of options.
Yeah. Is there like specific animals you want to work with?
Not really. But
Okay.
I never really wanted to be tied down.
That's
to
fair.
something.
Yeah.
So
I think that's a pretty good path then. You definitely like will get to work with things you probably don't know exist. I definitely did. I didn't know half the species like were even out there when I started. But let me something.
I've been pretty interested in like large mammal zoology specifically. But other than that,
Yeah, I can write down my email if you want on there. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And then, yeah, if you look on our website, it's just like Fish and Wildlife Michigan Field Office. All of our emails should be on there. So if there's someone who, like, yeah, if you want to look at like our bat biologist expert and you want to email her, you totally feel free to. Everyone's super. Yeah, or if like you don't hold on to the paper, my email should be up there. Or there's also like an office email, and our office administrator will connect you to like whoever is the lead on whatever question you're asking. So everyone in the field, even like other organizations, I would say definitely if you're interested in like working for the state, um, just like call the office or email someone in their office. Even for me, I'm looking for new positions. A lot of them are like temporary, seasonal positions, so I'm finding stuff all the time. And everyone is extremely helpful. Like everyone wants to succeed, so yeah, it's a good place to get into for sure.
yeah,
Yeah,
we're gonna stay.
well, they have a great, zoology program and yeah, everything. I loved Michigan State as well, so I would recommend it.
And they have a marching band, so.
Oh, are you in the band? Nice. What do you play?
Concert band, I do alto sax, and
Nice.
then I march cymbals.
Oh, really? Okay, that's cool. I always thought percussion would be fun. I played French horn in concert band and mellow and marching band. So. Okay, cool. That's awesome. Yeah, the state's band is like really, really good. So, I know they do high school days sometimes for that too. I think especially the percussion. I'm not positive. I have a friend who's in percussion, and I know that like their drum line is super competitive. But I think they do some like high school stuff. So maybe look out for it. That'd be very cool. Yeah. Yeah, no problem. Yeah. Great meeting you. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Definitely. Nah, of course, yeah.
And I hope somebody will look into that because
Yeah. No, it sounds like there's a couple people who are interested, so it should be great.